Now, Roshi, I know you don't drink, you don't do drugs, you don't do any cigarettes, any kind of smoking, honestly, use any kind of stimulants or consciousness altering substances.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your perspective on that and where that came from and what your thoughts are.
What was like some substance that I've tried in the past? Because I've for sure tried different substances throughout my life. It's not like I've never tried them. I just never had like a addictive enough personality to these things. Um, Anything that alters my ability to think accurately, anything that alters my ability to be productive, I would say. Uh, but also one of the main things I would say is being addicted to any kind of substance, being controlled by anything. I find it does weaken my willpower, and as soon as my willpower gets weakened in one aspect, I find it opens the door for every other addictions to possibly creep in.
Sure.
And those addictions could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to even be substances. It could even be like girls. It could be any sort of escapism activity. It could be watching TV. It could be death scrolling on TikTok.
Right.
It can be all of those. But what I've noticed is whenever I get hooked on, let's say, one thing, or allow myself to be overtaken by one thing, I'm more susceptible to becoming addicted to other things also.
So that's kind of how it plays out for you.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it in general?
I do know different. So one interesting like topic I've been talking a lot about with my clients lately is like alcohol and stuff like that. Alcohol's it's a really big thing on socializing. I have a lot of friends that drink. I have a lot of clients that drink, and to most people, it's a really big factor when it comes to going out, hanging out with friends. There's always alcohol involved in these kind of events.
Sure.
I know some people, they say it makes them more social, things like that. For me, I just feel like for me, it makes me a bit, how do I say this? Makes me a bit shameless when I'm drunk. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Like, I'm not as, I guess, I'm not really proud of like the way I carry myself when I'm drunk.
Right.
And things like that. But as far as what my thoughts are on other people using substances, I would say it depends on what you're using that substance for. Like, for example, if you have social anxiety, using alcohol to overcome your social anxiety, it could kind of become a crutch in that sense. It could prevent you from developing social skills if you're dependent on alcohol every single time to socialize. I've met people who, like, when I ask them, why don't you just not drink? And they're like, oh, well, if I don't have a drink, then I'm going to feel too awkward in social settings.
Right.
So that's a big one for some people. Also with weed, like I've seen some people, use weed for creativity, or I smoke weed so I can sleep or so I can eat. I smoke weed to clear my head. So I think there's nothing really wrong with trying substances in a moderate level, but if you don't monitor yourself on how dependent you become on it or what you're exactly using it for, I could see it easily becoming a crutch. And I think that's the scary part, because sometimes it happens so slowly. It happens from, maybe you smoke weed once just recreationally, or maybe you drink a couple times in the social settings, but then it can very easily become a dependent kind of substance for you. And I think for myself, to not get into that slippery slope, I just rather just not take it at all. Another substance that's very popular nowadays for mindfulness, I would say, is mushrooms. That's like a very common thing, microdosing. I notice a lot of people, they will use mushrooms to come to certain spiritual awakenings, certain realizations in life. And even though, like, I think that's cool, and I've done them before myself, I do like to come to those realizations in a sober way, I think.
Right.
Because I think that gaining those realizations sober, you learn a lot more lessons that you probably wouldn't have if you took the shortcut of using psychedelics to get there. But that's just for me. I'm not saying that for everybody, but I don't know.
Sure.
So I guess in a nutshell, basically your question was, what do I think about people using substances? Is just to basically monitor what you're using it for. Is it an addiction? Is it a crutch? Are you using it to fill a void? Are you using it as a way to help you overcome certain things you're not capable of doing when you're sober?
Right.
In that case, then it's probably an issue. But if you're just doing it recreationally here and there, I don't see a problem with it.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what word to use, but did you say something along the lines of like using what's the steps when someone wants to use a substance? You said they're in distress?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
They're feeling some emotional
Okay.
distress.
Yeah. So like, it's interesting because for me, those feelings of distress, those feelings of depression, those feelings of emptiness sometimes have been the biggest motivating forces in my life, the biggest times I came to the biggest realizations. And that if I was to numb it out or drown it out with substances, I don't think I would have ever came to those realizations. So that's another thing I would add on is like
That's powerful, man.
is when you're in those states of distress, and if you're using substances to mask that, you're missing out on a big sign, a big realization sometimes by masking it. So
And you've kind of supported people when they have been in that kind of a situation. I know some of your friends, some of your clients will call you up. Are you able to share a story of how someone was in that depression and instead of numbing themselves, they reached out to you, and how did you help them through that?
Yeah, I have friends and family who have addiction issues, and I grew up around people who, when they are in those states, they don't know what to do with them. When they're in a depressed state, when they're in a distressed state, they don't know what to do with all that buildup of emotion and mental stress. So because they don't know what to do with it, they opt out to drowning it or numbing it with something. And it's not really their fault. They just don't know how to convert that to something productive. And because I've been in those states multiple times and I didn't have any substances to drown it out, I've been in and out of those states multiple times, and the realizations that I've came to, it's helped me guide other people when they're in that state of mind too. So I've had friends before who've reached out. I know usually most people, like, they kind of self-isolate in those moments. They don't really like to reach out.
Yes.
But the few times that I've had a friend reach out in those states, I was able to kind of coach them through and get to the bottom of why they're feeling. Because I know for a lot of people I've talked to before, there is usually a root cause to why they're feeling that way. You can usually boil it down to some kind of discontentment in their life or something not going well in their life, and there's always a solution there. And if it weren't for them digging through that feeling of distress or sitting with that feeling of emptiness, I don't think they would have ever came to that realization. And it's so easy to opt out and partake in escapism or substance abuse. It's always the easy fix. It's always the easy way out. But I'm just here to say that you're feeling those reasons most of the time for a reason, and to sit with them. And usually there's a big sign, a big message that's being relayed to you during those moments.
Cool. Well, if anyone is maybe going through that kind of a feeling or a phase right now in their life, maybe they're feeling that way, you can always reach out to you. Email in the description below, and you guys can get in touch and maybe kind of work through some of those things. So if you guys are interested in that, reach out to Roshi, and he might be able to kind of work with you to see how you can use that depression, use maybe that anxiety that might have recently come up, and see how instead of numbing it with substances, you can move forward and use that as a learning moment. One thing I'm actually just genuinely curious on to get to know, I know you say you're not money motivated. You've mentioned that many times, which is so strange to me, especially in kind of the environment that we live in these days. A lot of people are in debt. People love shopping. I'll admit I'm kind of in that realm, although a lot of the things that I like to buy is like, it provides me an experience, right? Or it's like a new activity to do. But, I do, obviously I have desires, right? But like I've heard you say like, hey, I'm not really a car guy. To me, it's not really about the money many times. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, first off, I do think that you need to get your basic needs met first. So, if you are able to pay your rent, if you're able to, financially support yourself and have a bit of extra money on the side, I think that's like a goal everybody should strive for first.
Sure.
But I think I was saying more of like using money as a direct pursuit or like a direct goal rather than passion. I chase passion before I chase money. So I think that's kind of what I was saying, because I do know that some people, like, their main objective is to just get money, and they'll do anything to get money. But for me, I like to get money, but I would like to get money as a byproduct of pursuing what I'm passionate about. Just because I think, for me at least, I think in the long run, I will get more fulfillment doing something I'm passionate about and getting money at the same time, rather than just pursuing money directly.
Right.
And it makes me question, deep down, if I was to pursue money, like, what would be like the root motivation behind it? Like, why do I want money so bad? for some people, if you have a strong enough why behind that, like maybe you have strong goals to take your family out of poverty, and that's okay. But for me, being born in a first world country like this, I don't really have a lot of a large need for like a lot of money.
Sure.
I am doing pretty well right now. I've got myself
Of
to
course.
like a stable business now, where I'm making about like $7,000 a month average around there
Wow.
with my home business. So that gets my needs done. It also helps me save up some money. It also has me to keep some money as for emergencies in case for my family and stuff like that.
Right.
But for me, I think everybody's born on earth with like a special gift. And for me, my purpose in life is to find that gift and to just share it with the world. And that to me is how I will get fulfillment in life, I think.
I mean, yeah, that's first of all, that's a great monthly income, right? Obviously, being a business owner and stuff, you've created that. I think when I was talking about money, I think it's like, these fake gurus nowadays who are selling their Forex trading programs or, whatever program it might be, and they'll rent a Lambo or they'll go to Miami and rent a mansion, and that's what they're selling to people. And I think there's a lot of young people out there who see that, or they watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians or this reality TV show, and in their mind, they're like, if I don't have that G-Wagon, or if I don't have that Miami mansion, or if I'm not working 4 days a week and making, $200,000 a year, then I'm a failure. And I think I love what you said, where it's like, find the motivation why you even want that. But I feel like in their mind, they're like, oh my God, if I don't have, the G-Wagon, I'm a failure. If I don't have the mansion, I'm a failure. And then they try to enroll in these get-rich-quick programs and stuff. So what would you say to like that type of a person, if someone's in that kind of a mindset, that kind of a situation?
I mean, I've met people who've been in that kind of mindset, and I've met people who have chased money directly for those reasons, and they're like 40, 50 years old, they're still living that life, still chasing that next nice car, still chasing that nice lifestyle.
Sure.
But I've seen evidence of it. I've seen enough evidence of it to see that you're never going to be fully content in that pursuit. So, I mean, like I was saying earlier about getting to the root cause of why you're doing it. I know some guys who they thought that if they get a certain amount of money, that all of a sudden they'll get respect and love from women. And I've seen that fail multiple times. I've dated women who have dated the guy who had money and thought that the money was going to get him the love and respect,
Right.
only for him to find out that it doesn't.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
that or trying to fill certain insecurities with money, I would say if that's something that you chase money for, that it's probably going to be like a dead end thing most of the time. And the thing is, I've never been rich, but I have experienced an abundance of money in my own, to my own level, I guess. I had like a little short phase when I was 18 years old. When I was working at this barbershop, I was pretty busy at that barbershop. And at 18 years old, I was making about $5,000 a month, living by myself, no responsibilities. So I experienced a small level of abundance where I had a lot of excess money, and I was spending money on materialistic things. And I thought it was going to bring me fulfillment, and I didn't have to do it for long to find out that it wasn't. And I came to the realization by the end of it that it really wasn't going to fill any insecurities that I had, that I still had to go do that deep identity level work to fix those issues. So that's just my experience with using money to fill insecurities. But like I said, if your motivation is coming from a more positive place, then there's nothing wrong with it. But I would just look more deeper into your motivations behind why you're doing what you're doing. And that applies to even with my life now, with even the stuff I do now. Like I do kind of look into that, my motivations, not even just when it comes to money, but even with art or with my business or my relationships with people. I do always look at it in that way. Like, what's my motivation behind it? I always go back and try to find clarity in that, because I find whenever my motivation comes from a more superficial desire, from a more superficial place, it doesn't really give me that same driving force as it does when it comes from a more deeper place. So,
Sure.
yeah.
And I think there is something to be said about using money and shopping as kind of like almost like a distraction or to fill a void. I think that is a big part of things as well. And I think you really touched on that point of talking about, what's the deeper level kind of motivation that you have. And once you kind of figure that out, then it's easy to work forward. It reminds me of like, when I was younger, I loved skateboarding, and I would see these skateboarders. They weren't really rich, but they were sponsored, right? And they were like they would go on tours and like drive around the country and just skateboard different spots. And like I was always admired their lifestyle, but it's because they were doing their passion. Or like even now, like I like to ride dirt bikes, and I see some of these enduro riders, and they're not rich either, but they've got the manufacturer like Honda, KTM, whatever, will sponsor them, give them their bike, give them enough money so that they can travel around the world in different events and just ride. And I think a lot of people see that and they're like, you know what? Maybe if I had that lifestyle, I wouldn't care about the money. And so I think it touches on your point of like, find that passion, and then you're not really going to care about the money. And I think that's what I really appreciate about kind of what you've created in your life is you found that passion with art, with fitness, with barbering. And like that's kind of just what you do, how you live your life. So it almost seems like money doesn't really matter because you're doing what you love every day anyways.
Yeah.
So I think everyone can bring more of that into their life. Like I hang around with guys who are really into the gym, and for them, like after work, like they're actually working out. And when you actually have that activity, you're saving a lot of time, where other people might like go into the shopping or daydream about having that G-Wagon or this or that.
Yeah.
And then some people can't really sidestep not making a lot of money because, like, let's say your passion is like, sailing around the world. Well, even that, I think I've heard stories online of guys will save up like 30,000, buy like a used sailboat, work on it, fix it up, and sail around the world on a budget. So I guess a lot of things can happen, but
it's actually. I would want to touch on this topic about like my own personal experience of finding that balance between passion and money. Because I do think that there's a balance that you got to meet in the middle. Because if you go too far into each spectrum, like too far of the spectrum of just being passionate is like the starving, struggling artist who's borderline delusional, and he thinks that one day some rich art dealer is going to come to him and he's just going to buy all his art and fix all his problems.
Right.
And then there's like the other spectrum of the guy who just all he thinks about is money. He's superficial and he has no passion in his life, and he has no there's no magic and no spark to his life. So I've kind of been in either spectrum before, where like there was a period where I was only focusing on art for about a year or two. I think it was about 2 years, and I went to about $14,000 in credit card debt, just focusing on art because I was kind of like that delusional artist. I wanted to live that life for a little bit just to see what it's like. And then from there, I switched over to being more of the logic-based businessman, where I'm just thinking logic, money, business, all that. Not so artsy, I guess, but more towards the business side. And I was able to pay off all my credit card debt. But now I would say I'm like in that perfect, comfortable space where I'm financially secure, I make good money from my business, and I'm able to express myself creativity. And also I think having that creative side, but thinking like a businessman at the same time is important, because when it comes to art, you need to have the world find your art, and you need to be known, and you need to put yourself out there. And I think to think like a businessman is going to come really handy when it comes to putting yourself out there and getting your art sold and stuff. So I've kind of found like a good middle ground between the two now.
Yeah. So as you can see in this video, we kind of talked about how important it is to have clarity in your goals. And Roshi does have a video on goal setting. And then using that clarity to guide your decisions on what kind of hobbies that you might choose, or how you decompress, or how you structure your life. And really going from a consumer to a producer and seeing how that can bring and add value to your life. Sure, yeah.
Some shit like that.